Previously on this channel, I talked about the notion of frustrating characters in Smash, a group of fighters that have been the target of controversy and outrage from the community for how, well, frustrating they are, particularly to go up against. Sonic, Steve, Kazuya, Min, for one reason or many, they can be quite volatile opponents to face, sometimes unfairly so. But while those cast members have been on the receiving end of the player base's ire for the better part of 2022, there's another class of fighters who manage to carry that same element of frustration, more so depending on circumstances. Everyone likes to complain about modern characters having overloaded kits and janky playstyles, but even longtime veterans of Smash are known to be quite difficult to face, and I would say no group embodies this more than trappers. For today, I want to go through the class in more detail, what trapping is in Smash terminology, who is part of this archetype, and why they're potentially the most dangerous fighters in all of Smash, especially now that more and more of them are gaining notoriety in the competitive scene. For anyone with aspirations of learning how to play Smash seriously, there's a high likelihood you've heard the word trapping used in some context or another. Frame trapping, ledge trapping, or just trapping as a whole. Normally in games, to trap someone is to lure them into a dangerous situation. In a strategy game like League of Legends, you might spot the enemy champion low on health and chase after them to score a kill, only for reinforcements to come out from Fog of War and take you out instead. In Smash, baiting your opponent into making a mistake is still a thing, but with how input focused the game is, it's less so drawing them towards a premeditated trap and more about forcing them into it through pressure and effective neutral. Although there are trigger-based attacks like Isabel's down B and Snake's ult down smash from Brawl, trapping in this case denotes putting your opponent into a lose-lose situation, or at least a situation that severely restricts the amount of options they have. The best way to demonstrate this is through ledge trapping. When recovering back to stage, 9 times out of 10 you will grab the ledge first, offering you brief invincibility, to which there are 5 ways to get off the ledge and hopefully on solid ground. Normal get up, ledge roll, jump, get up attack, and drop ledge, usually followed by a double jump into an aerial or air dodge. Technically there's a 6th option, which is to just stay on the ledge, but depending on what character you're playing and who you're up against, that's just not a smart option. While you do have several choices for how to get off ledge, your opponent will be doing everything they can to keep you from doing so. Ledge trapping is the act of predicting which option your opponent will take and attacking accordingly. For example, if your opponent tries to jump off ledge, you can attack with an aerial. If your opponent tries to get up attack, you can block or dodge it then strike back. If they normal get up, you can grab them out of shield, stuff like that. Regardless of the scenario, trapping occurs when one player has less options than the other, and said other player tries to guess which of the remaining options will be used in an attempt to gain more of a lead. Compared to Smash 4 and Brawl, much of Ultimate's gameplay is predicated on trapping. Since aerials are a lot more spammable and options such as ledge regrab or infinite air dodges are no longer a thing, being a disadvantage even once can lead to a painful barrage of damage or potentially an entire stock loss, with the latter being a very real threat against their class in question. Despite trapping being a universal practice, trappers are known for being especially proficient at them, going so far as to create these damned if you do damned if you don't situations at will. Unlike sword fighters who can easily be identified, there's no strict definition or criteria for what makes a trapper, and people might disagree with the extent at which you can define a character as such. For me, I consider someone a trapper based on 3 factors, and usually they have to have all 3 to be definitively so. 1. They're most known for pressuring you into making a decision immediately, especially when you're low on options. Again, this is a case of opinion, but some characters feel like they were born to make you sweat with all their shenanigans. Going back to ledge trapping, one good way to tell is if they have a way to threaten ledge hang. One of the most notorious examples of this is Zelda's Phantom Slash. When channeling the full body, it performs a massive upward slash, not only having massive range, but also being able to strike under it during the first few frames. No matter how good your ledge hang is, Phantom Slash is guaranteed to hit you. This puts an enormous amount of pressure on Zelda's opponent as they must act immediately lest they get hit by it. Thing is, if you mistime your getup, the slash is able to cover every single getup option including ledge drop. So for most characters, regardless of which option you take, you have to react to whenever Zelda decides to send it forward. Being forced to get off ledge immediately takes away one of your most important mix-up options, timing, making it very easy for Zelda to ledge trap you since even though she still has to guess which option you choose, at least she doesn't have to guess when. Granted, the majority of cast members have some way to pressure ledge via some form of 2-framing option. I wouldn't really consider DDD a trapper just because Gordo can bounce slowly towards you on ledge hang. So to narrow things down a bit, trappers are also able to impose that sense of urgency while on stage. If you're wondering what separates a trapper from a zoner or a projectile user, that's where the next factor comes into play. 2. They have elements that need to be micromanaged by both the one playing them and their opponent, and said element functions autonomously from the active character. The thing about zoners is that while they're able to pressure you from a long distance, the pressure directly stems from them. Samus's charge shot is their most lethal asset in neutral, especially when fully loaded. You have to be ready to block or dodge at all times lest you be blasted to Kingdom Come. However, the focus of your attention only has to be on her, which is what you were doing anyway. In a manner of speaking, Charge Shot is a really massive disjoint, like a really long sword. Sure, it has a ton of range, but as long as you have eyes on Samus, you'll be ready for it. Trappers have access to tools and moves that pressure their opponent while existing outside of their line of actions, thus turning the matchup into a contest of situational awareness, and the one who epitomizes this the most is Snake. Snake's usage of remote explosives lets him establish control of a battlefield by dividing his opponent's attention, taking advantage of players who are too busy focusing on one thing by punishing them with the other. Against Snake, the key to beating him is to keep track of where his grenades and C4 are. Oftentimes, his bombs are more of a threat than he is, but if you tunnel vision too much on where his explosives are, that gives him an opening to smack you around with his melee attacks. If you're distracted by him though, you may lose track of the C4 bomb right under your feet and pay the price for it with the stock. It doesn't necessarily have to be inconspicuous either. Zelda's Phantom is quite large and easy to spot, but drawing your attention, if even for a short moment, is all a trapper needs to screw you over in neutral. You may have heard the term conditioning before. Conditioning is the concept of training or pressuring opponents into a certain response so you can increase the likelihood of landing a hard read on said condition. Snake is a very simple ledge trapping condition tool, Up Smash. The mortar shoots upwards, automatically discouraging you from jumping. If it lands, it can strike ledge hang too, so you have to do something quickly. Neutral get up and get up attack is also risky for that same reason. This leaves most characters with only one option, roll, and that's exactly what Snake is ready for, so he sets up a down smash or a grab to throw you right off stage. You're so focused on avoiding the up smash mortar that you forget Snake is also a threat. Essentially, anyone with an actively threatening object that exists without impeding the caster's movement is a trapping tool. Robin's Arcfire, Rob's Gyro, Link's Bomb, Pac-Man's Hydrant, Diddy's Banana, Steve's Minecart and Blocks, Villager's Lloyd Rocket, so on and so forth. 3. They usually lack conventional approach and pressure tools. This would be the final thing that distinguishes trappers. Just now I mentioned Rob's Gyro as a trapping tool, and it very much is, but Rob's more of an all-round character since he can go on the offensive using moves like down tilt, dash attack, or falling nair, and his ground and air mobility isn't that bad. Some may have an excellent approach option like Snake's dash attack, or surprisingly good frame data for close quarters combat like Pac-Man or Steve, but ideally, trappers are more in their element when their opponent is coming towards them. Conveniently, they can have this happen quite easily thanks to factors 1 and 2. The last thing you want is for Steve to mine a full inventory of materials, or for Pac-Man to charge bonus routes so he acquires spell or a key. Likewise, most players who get fed up with Snake constantly throwing grenades or Robin chucking arc fires and thunders like no tomorrow. Their apparent lack of mobility further incentivizes them to sit back and wait. Snake may have dash attack, but his physics are kind of underwhelming. Trappers do share this wait and strike win condition with whiff punishers, but they go about it in their own creative ways. Historically, Smash's competitive scene, at least in the West, has pushed the narrative of aggression. The more aggressive your character is, the further you can go with it. As a spectator sport, viewers typically enjoy sets featuring more explosive, combo-heavy fighters, and for the longest time they were regarded as the best characters for how strong they can be when optimized. Ultimate's early years were dominated by these very characters. The PGR UV2 featured tons of players who piloted very aggressive rushdown or combo-centric fighters. Leia with Joker, Samsora with Peach, Tweak with Pokemon Trainer and Wario, Nairo with Palutena and ZSS, Mars with ZSS, Zachary with Joker, and everyone else in this cast, Gluttony with Wario, Light with Fox, and many more. Japan has a more methodical and patient playstyle, which is why most of its top reds like Kamame, T, Shuton, Protobanham, and Ken play the likes of Pac-Man, Olimar, and Sonic. The introduction of DLC fighters, along with deeper exploration of the roster, buffs to low performers, and nerfs to high performers, have drastically altered our perceptions of what is good and what isn't. The majority of DLC characters, especially Fighters Pass 2, transparently give off the impression that playing fighters who go hard in the paint pose a lot of risk. Min, Sephiroth, Byleth, and the Aegis make use of their long range to space out any short-range fighters, preventing them from getting within striking distance at all. Meanwhile, brawlers like Terry and Kazuya nuke your stock if you so much as make a single careless approach. And then there's Steve, whose gimmicks and elaborate traps were so unexpected that even pro players were at their wits' end on how to address them. That was because they never had to. Everyone was used to fighting straightforward in-your-face characters because that was what everyone thought was good at the time. Lack of experience against these foes gave way to a lot of new competitive threats. Those random mid-tiers who demolish everyone at your favorite local finally came out of the woodwork and are ready to clap some cheeks. Now we're seeing an increasingly higher number of bait and punish characters, and trappers benefit from this shift heavily. See, fighting games are intense because players spend every ounce of mental energy on them and their opponent, figuring out what their moves, patterns, and habits are with hardly any downtime in between interactions, if any at all. And that's the part that makes trappers so dangerous. In other big genres like MOBAs, RTSs, or even shooters, there's always time for you to strategize, analyze the situation, and think about what needs to be done. In fighting games, you don't have that luxury. Even if your opponent is all the way on the other side of the blast zone, they can reach you in a few seconds max. This leaves you with almost no time to rest and think, which is why Smash is so mentally exhausting. Constant exposure to high stress. Any distraction, even a small one, can disrupt a player's thought process, giving trappers an inherent psychological advantage against their opponent. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything that threatening. Pac-Man's Hydrant, apart from the hitbox when falling, is relatively harmless. It spits out water. But since it exists and can be interacted with, that adds a whole new layer of possible outcomes, many of which can be the one that loses you the game. All they need is a split second of you losing track of something. I can't even recount how many times I was blown up by C4 right under my feet because I was so tunnel visioned on Snake in the air. The problem is, the traps set by each trapper are all unique in that you can't make an educated guess on what would happen assuming you've had no prior experience in that matchup. Compare two sword fighters with each other, like Marth and Ike. Even though the two of them have different attributes and stats on their moves, you can sort of make the conclusion that facing them head-on means having to break past their sword. You can also gather that since neither of them have a projectile, if they want to apply any meaningful pressure, they have to approach. Trying to find any common ground between Snake and Pac-Man, Rosalina and Link, Steve and Villager is virtually impossible. Each of them have their own unique repertoire of ways to blindside you that the only way you can be prepared for them is by directly studying the character and fighting against them. Naturally, that makes them very prone to matchup checking, and even the best of the best are not immune to being matchup checked. Prior to encountering Onin at SmashCon 2022, miraculously, Leo never had to face off against any prominent Steve player like Yanni, Didi, Akla, D-Dog, aka Quandale Dinglingleton, and so on. His only encounter with Jake was back in February 2021 online, before Jake began one-tricking Steve. The absence of top-level matchup experience for Leo would turn into one of the most humiliating 3-0 losses of his career by Onin. Another prime example would be Cosmos vs T at Layout C, where the former looked completely lost on what to do against Pac-Man's various pressure tools like Hydrant and Bell. I believe at one point, Cosmos even said that he would deliberately counterpick Final Destination to bait T into going Kazuya, an action that is widely considered bracket suicide purely because he was more confident in the matchup. By no means am I saying trappers are these unsolvable death machines who are secretly top tier and have no counters, but what they do have is the element of surprise. Fighters like Cloud, Palutena, Wolf, Roy, despite their very strong performances, are more or less universally understood. Their status is not a result of janky BS, rather a strong stat line. Trappers may also possess good frame data, long range and whatnot, but their greatest strength is their ability to surprise and/or psych you out, sometimes to a frustrating extent. When executed perfectly, they can easily throw you into a lose-lose situation. Some cast members just don't have a way to escape certain traps. You ever wonder why players cower behind their shield when Pac-Man's holding Bell or Diddy's holding Banana? Because sometimes that's literally all they can do, or at least that's all players think they can do. Getting struck by Banana or Bell guarantees a follow-up from almost every attack. Why do players look utterly confused when Steve is chilling behind a 3-block wall and mining? Because sometimes that's all they can do without putting themselves in serious danger. Trappers add more complexity to a player's understanding of Smash Bros. If they're unable to adapt to that complexity, what's theoretically an even matchup or a slightly unfavorable one at worst can seem almost unwinnable, and I have a feeling they will only continue to become more of a threat. The most dangerous opponent is one you know nothing about. Anyone who's played Smash competitively will tell you that knowledge is half the battle. With almost 90 fighters comprising the roster, the players who will succeed are those who are prepared to handle as many matchups as possible, but we don't know what trappers are fully capable of, and likely never will. So what do you guys think about trappers? Do you believe they're a meta threat, or am I overrating them too much? Let me know in the comments down below. For now, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter at Vars, joining my Discord server, and if you'd like to support me further, then check out my Patreon. By donating, you get access to benefits for all 3 of my channels, Vars, Vars 2, and Vars 3. Till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.